I'm talking to Jonah Andrist. Jonah is the host of a podcast called Western Thought about literature. Um, so Jonah, thanks so much for talking to me today. Why is literature so important to you?
Uh, so, and I even had time to think about this, and I still don't know the answer. Uh, I think it's important. Well, it's like, it, is it supposed to be important on a personal level or a larger level?
Why did you decide to make literature like such an important part of your life? What precipitated that?
I think it just helped me a lot. Like, I think I was very confused about how the world worked. And when, like, every great novel basically encapsulates the world and puts it through the character's psyche in a way that you like, the more books you read, the more you understand what the world is, because every the world is just this encapsulation of mini worlds. It's like a multiverse, except each individual is their own
I
little
love that.
space. Yeah. And because I was just so confused about how the world worked, like I was depressed. I was like anxious, and like maybe I could have just gone with the flow of things, but then I would get so stubborn about not knowing stuff that then I was like, well, I like there has to be something that can help me figure this out. And it turned out to be novels. I mean, it I guess, I mean, there's, if I had a different brain, I guess it could have just been like being a neuroscientist or like just studying psychology, but it seemed to me novels encapsulated everything involved with that. So I guess that's my answer.
When did you realize that? How old were you, and like what turned you on to that fact?
Uh, I would say I was, well, when I first started out, like I was just kind of a, I was like, I used to tell people all the time, I didn't think I was a real person until I was like 19 years old. Because I was just such a chameleon. Like, I just slipped in between groups and people, and um, I originally just wanted to make movies, because that was the first thing I loved, was film. And I loved, I mean, because a lot of books are basically just movies that we play in our heads. And so I was like, well, if that's what most books are, then why don't we just do that? Why don't we just make movies? But then I came to the realization that there was stuff in books that was a deep inner life that could never be properly captured on film. It could never be translated to film. And so um, that's when I switched and really got more interested in literature.
Nice. You have a podcast episode titled Was Melville homosexual or something like that? What's
Yeah,
that title?
yeah.
Yeah.
Was Herman Melville homosexual?
So what's the answer to that question? And what's the evidence? What's some evidence that you can bring to one side or the other?
Well, we read a book that basically had no evidence, but it was written by a very flamboyant gay man who was convinced that Melville was, even though he didn't really put that much effort into trying to prove it. Uh, I don't know. Like, my guess is a little bit, definitely, like
Hmm.
probably at least by
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think part of the problem, and I'm not an expert in this. This is a topic that I really want to learn more about. But I feel like our modern terminology around sexuality, like we don't realize how modern it is, in the sense that like
Yeah,
um the term like homosexual didn't really exist in Melville's time, you
right.
know?
Yeah, yeah.
Um and so like yeah, what exactly does that mean? Like it's like today, like I think being gay is just like very different than, or being bi would be very different than being gay or bi in that world.
Yeah,
Um
absolutely.
yeah.
And
And
that's part of what we explored, I think.
yeah, well, here's some evidence to all of this. I just pulled up in my hand the Gutenberg uh the Gutenberg Moby Dick.
Mm.
Um do you know that, familiar with the famous squeeze the sperm passage in
No,
Moby Dick?
no, I'm
So
not.
I'll read it right now. It's he says that he's describing the scene where they have to knead the sperm from the sperm whale. So the line goes, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze all the morning long. I squeezed that sperm till I myself almost melted into it. I squeezed that sperm till a strange sort of insanity came over me, and I found myself unwittingly squeezing my co-laborer's hand in it, mistaking their hands for the gentle globulars. Such an abounding, affectionate, friendly, loving feeling did this avocation beget, that at last I was continuously squeezing their hands and looking up into their eyes sentimentally, as much as to say, "Oh, my dear fellow beings, why should we longer cherish any social acerbities, or know the slightest ill humor or envy? Come, let us squeeze hands all round. Nay, let us all squeeze ourselves into each other. Let us squeeze ourselves universally into the very milk and sperm of kindness."
I
So
think you'd call that pansexual.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. But it raises a great question. It's about like the similar questions come up with Walt Whitman, for example. Like,
Well, he was gay.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, for
yeah.
sure. That's true. It is more clear cut in his case.
Yeah, there's like letters, him writing love letters to soldiers because he was a nurse in the Civil War, and like,
Right.
yeah,
That's
it's
a
pretty
great
clear
point.
cut.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the question would then be like, was Melville like Walt Whitman? Right.
no, yeah, no, he wasn't. But like, no writer should be exactly like every other. I mean, that's what we like about them is that they're slightly different. Like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't really have a lot more to say about that. That seems patently clear to me. I
Right.
mean,
So I guess, yeah, no, that's a good point. But I guess the analogy for me is how in Walt Whitman you see he uses like very sexualized language, to talk about the American landscape and talk about like he uses imagery, which is like evocative of like a kind of like a pansexuality, I think, in some of his poems.
yeah,
Um and
I,
like
I think of Walt Whitman more as like a self love kind of
right,
guy.
that too.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
totally, totally.
like
100%.
like the action of his sexuality is not really all that important to the poetry. It's just kind of like an interesting side note.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't like. Uh, I mean, Song of Myself. I mean, that's like his most famous, and that's just an ode to learning things about yourself and like being comfortable with who you are,
Yeah.
and which is exactly what our modern sense of sexuality has brought. That's good, I think, is like not being ashamed if you are of this certain other type, or just knowing yourself as good as possible, as well as possible.
Yeah. Awesome. So that this is a fun topic and a topic I hope to learn more about. I hope to do more research on and read more about because yeah, it's fascinating. Um, should we pivot to talk a little bit about depression?
Yeah, well, we can. I was thinking when you're asking the literature, why is literature important question.
Mhm.
I think that is part of why. Like, I feel like it cured my depression, um, which is an impossible thing to prove. And I know it's like so weird and nebulous, and like you try and tell it to anyone and they're like they just don't believe you. They're like, well, you probably never had depression in the first place. And when it's gone, when the depression's gone, it's so hard to think back and truly understand that person you were when you were depressed. So it's like they might be right, like maybe I never was. But and that's when I get tempted to use like really inflammatory language when I talk to people about depression, because I'm always like, well, is it even real? Like, and as soon as I bring up the word real in terms of depression, people are like, oh, it's like all over the board. Yeah, people really value have deep. Um, well, of course they have a deep connection to their depression. But I don't know. Do you have any experience with it?
A little bit. I think not extreme, not severe. I'm associated. I have friends who have had very severe depression, so I know I'm familiar with it from the outside. Personally, I've dealt with anxiety throughout my life, and I feel
Mm,
like when I got better at that, when I feel like I moved past a lot of my anxieties, I was left with like a sense of emptiness in life. Like as if like the anxiety was masking like a deep feeling of like emptiness.
mm,
And it never like got to the level of like I felt like it was disrupting a lot of things, but it was like heavy in a way also. It was something to like, notice and like and try to like make sense of and work with. Um but how about you? How much would you be willing to share sort of about how that played out in your life?
uh, well, you know, well, this is the other thing. Like, I never had it so bad. Like, I talk to people who like well, example I wrote in my article about it is my ex-girlfriend. She told me a story like she was just on her couch for like 3 weeks and
Right.
like didn't move,
I know
which
stories like that. Yeah.
yeah, which I never did anything like that. I mean, to me, when I was feeling that bad, I was like, well, I just have to move. I have to do something, or else this feeling is going to kill me, literally. So I wrote the article on depression because
It's the one about melancholia, right? By Lars von Trier. Is that the same one or a different one?
yeah.
I read that one. And I love Melancholia, by the way. Great movie. So,
Yeah. What do you love about milk?
well, I think I love a lot of the things that you point out in your article, which will be
Yeah.
linked below. Which is that uh it captures a mood. It captures a listlessness very, very well. Yeah, the way like again, you talk about this in your article. It's not anything, not breaking new ground here, but like the fact that Lars von Trier juxtaposes sort of this inner psychological experience of feeling depressed and listless with like the end of the world, you know. Yeah, it's like sort of feels like a really powerful image and metaphor. But maybe you could spell out more, your own thinking about that because your thinking is like really well developed on this issue. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like well, there's also that thing David Foster Wallace said, if if I could talk about it the same way I could writing it, I wouldn't need to write it.
Nice. Yeah,
uh,
that's fair.
but but yeah, it was basically just that. And every time I have brought this up, like on the internet forums, like when it first got in my head, I would bring it up to talk to people, like on internet forums or even in real life sometimes, and I got so much pushback. I'm sure even if anyone clicks through, they'll find a million things wrong with it because the value people attach to their depression is so personal and like and I also think like when I was 20 in the throes of my depression, I couldn't have listened to anyone's like take on it. It was like mine. It's like I didn't want it cured or whatever. I don't know. That's some of the stuff, but the melancholia, it's just basically about how when I rewatched it, I realized like if you look at some of the outside factors that Trier writes into the characters, the main character is depressed, but she has good reasons to be depressed. Like the people in her life are manipulating her, and like the system that she's born into makes her feel indebted, and maybe she doesn't want to participate in that at all and just like break out of it. And it's like that's what I did. I guess I broke out of it. Now I got $4 to my name, and so I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But I'm not depressed. I feel pretty good most of the time. So.
Money by happiness.
Well, what's that Daniel Tosh joke? No one looks sad on a jet ski.
Right. That's great.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. There's a long history of Sartre or Chekhov. Ward Number Six, my favorite novella of all time, of like this argument of, well, as long as you have peace in your own mind,
Mm.
then everything's good. But then Chekhov kind of blows that up in Ward Number Six because this is the doctor. He's got his good dark beer at night, and as soon as he goes into the mental asylum, it's like everything starts going sideways. It's like, well, physical comfort was a part of what made his life better than the person
Mhm.
in the mental asylum.
So what helped you get out of your depression? You mentioned literature.
Yeah.
Can you be like, so I'm imagining that someone watching this is depressed. Okay. Because based on the title of the video or whatever. What do you say to someone who's depressed? What was your path and what did you learn from that
Oh
that you could
God.
pass on?
What would you say?
It's a good question. What would I say? Well, what worked for my anxiety was meditation
Yeah.
and sort of learning more about an Eastern perspective on the mind, where there's a sense that trying to observe what the mind does
Yeah.
and observe dispassionately and observe from a place of compassion. And if I feel something like anxiety, what I might do. This is borrowed from my reading in Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist monk that who's written a lot of books. And you say, hello, my anxiety. You know what I'm saying? This is like my old friend,
Mhm.
you know, that's visiting me. Like what can I give you? Like what do you need? You know what I'm saying? And treat it sort of as being separate, but something that is visiting that you have to, take care of, you know. So those kind of tools and techniques over time, I think have been very helpful for me. But it's different from depression. And obviously that's, my particular story. So yeah, what would you say?
Well, I mean, that's a great answer. I want to steal your answer. But uh, I think a multi-pronged approach is always good. Like I think looking at your thoughts with compassion, but also realizing it's gonna be a while. Like it's like there's not gonna be a quick fix. Like but it's gonna be worth it. Well, once you put in the effort, like go just I mean, I don't know, go like really read more and do it with the same practice of looking at your own mind. Do it in the practice of like you're looking at someone else's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because that to me has a lot of curative effects in the sense of like, well, not only does it combat some sense of loneliness, but it combats your own solipsism. Like I'm stuck inside myself. It's like, well, you're not though. Like if you really want to, you can. There's ways you can transcend that and get outside of that.
What can you share about your own personal though, your own personal like solutions, if anything? You can say nothing, but
Well, this is
yeah.
what I was trying to say. It's like it's so once it gets foreign to you, it's hard for me to even go back to it. It's hard for me to
Mm-hmm.
even
Mm-hmm.
talk
That's
about
fair.
it in a
Yeah.
rational way.
That's
Um,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, but it was definitely. I mean, it was books, and I think realizing I kind of did it to myself. You know,
What does that mean?
like I like part of me wanted to be sad. Like part of me thought it was deeper. It made me deeper to be sad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like like that was part of what it meant to be a good artist. I mean, because this isn't going to be true for everyone who suffers from depression. So this is terrible advice. But like for me, when I was like, I thought about art and I thought about wanting to be an artist. And I thought one of the first steps of that for that was to, be kind of sad and melancholy about everything. Um, yeah. So, uh,
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's like a grain of truth to that, right? I mean, there are a lot of tortured artists in this world,
right.
a lot of great artists who battle depression and some who commit suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or drink themselves into a bad place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll probably die young, but it won't be because of hanging myself. It'll just be my liver fails at 59 or whatever.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay with that. That seems like perfectly reasonable. I mean, like, yeah, Kerouac, late 40s, Fitzgerald 40s. I mean, like, if I make it nearly 60, I'm like, I'm golden, man. If I hadn't hit my stride in writing by then, I'm not gonna hit it after that. So
Can you make the case? Let's say someone's watching this video and they're just a happy person and
yeah.
they've never felt sad before. Why should people like what's the case for being depressed? Like what's the argument that, depression is the way to go?
This is like the opposite of what we were saying. Okay, so this is like improv. Uh, well, I don't know, man. There is no case for it. It's just it. Well, look in the article, I argue that like it's it's a buried kind of anger, really. Like depression is an anger response to being penned in by a system which you have no control in. Like, and I think it's fairly obvious that indigenous cultures don't have depression. So I think we all do value it in some way. Like we value our mourning and melancholy because it's like, well, it gives an outward expression. It gives the impression of an outward expression of deepness.
Of what?
of deepness, of like,
Deepness.
oh,
Okay.
they're a deep person because
Mm.
they're capable of feeling this much or whatever. You know, Kundera makes this argument of we are homo sentimentalis, we're the feeling man. The more you present your feelings, the more it can kind of give you status. Well, that's not exactly right, but and I've heard many people argue against that, but to me, it's an interesting conjecture. I don't know. That's all I have to say about that.
Do you have any thoughts on nihilism?
I was thinking about nihilism yesterday when I was talking to myself. Have you ever like you like doing these interviews, right?
Yeah.
And so I read this book by David Graeber called A New History of Humanity, and the best part I got out of it was something that I've always understood intuitively, which is that when you can't hold an abstract thought by itself in your head for very long. But the way to get around that is by having a conversation with someone, by like bouncing ideas back and forth. And the loophole for me has always been like I just have a conversation with myself in my head. Um, uh, I don't know if that's interesting to anyone. I've always been curious if that's how most people think. Like,
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think I do less of it now than I did before I started trying to make a concerted effort to observe my thoughts, you know.
mm,
But for sure, I mean, absolutely. When I'm preparing for an interview, yeah, you know, I'll go through scenarios in my head, trying to imagine, you know, the back and forth before it happens. Yeah, is that what
but
you're describing? Yeah,
did you start doing that at a very young age?
I'm sure I did. I'm sure I
Yeah,
did. Yeah, I think it's
but you don't
normal.
have
I
any
think I
like
think it's a perfectly normal, developmentally standard part of human life. You know, for
yeah,
most people to have these kind of internal dialogue. Yeah,
but you don't have like a memory of you doing it,
not so much, but it doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
right? Well, I mean, like, what's your memory in general of your youth? Like, how good is it?
I had a good youth. How about you? I mean, what can I say? I don't want to be so vague. I just good. I had a suburban. I had a very privileged youth. I had a very privileged youth. I had two loving parents in suburbia. It's about as privileged as you can get.
Yeah,
Really,
yeah.
really about as privileged as you can get. It doesn't mean I didn't have some traumas. You know, it doesn't mean that. You know, but still, like really, really like top. You know, 3% or something of privileged youth. Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I 3%. That's pretty high. I don't know if I'd put myself up that far, but yeah, I definitely had the privilege to not be forced to do anything, to fall into anything uh, because I had to. Um, but yeah, I was talking more about like memory because I honestly have a very specific memory of being like 6 and being like pretending I was on Oprah's talk show
Mm.
and that like starting to talk to myself in my head that way. Like, do you have memories like that?
I don't have specific memories, but what I know of myself is I think I probably did stuff like that.
Okay. Huh. But it's so
I think I had an imaginative world. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people, certainly people who are probably overrepresented in the people who are bookish and people who are interested in writing,
yeah.
like you and me. I think it's normal to have like a deep inner world of conversation. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
But
I
do you feel like that makes you more like you think yours was such an extreme that it was pretty unusual?
I
Because
have no idea. I have
okay,
no idea. I've not I've not asked enough people. I don't have enough. My
yeah.
sample
I
size
think
is
I think a
not.
lot of people, yeah, I think a lot of people might be foreign to a lot of people. You know, I don't know. I mean, I think you and me maybe have that in common because of sort of, our, again, like I said, it might be overrepresented in people who are readers and stuff like that, and writers to some extent. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, I guess I was happy to hear that maybe it had a point. Like maybe it helped me wrestle with abstract ideas a little bit more than if I hadn't done that.
Mm.
Although I'm not like it's weird to say out loud because I'm not like proud of it. It sounds so egomaniacal. Like even when I was 6, I was imagining being interviewed by Oprah. Like what did I think I had to say? Why do I think I have something to say in this interview now? Like where does this come from? Like where does this desire to express myself? Like what is this? Like and that's another thing you wrestle with as an artist. You're like I mean, as long as you're going deeply into it, you're like, well, who am I that this becomes my most important reason for being alive? Yeah, it's strange sometimes to think
But what about nihilism?
about. There's the popular version of thinking about nihilism, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's the true Nietzschean version of nihilism. Um, but the true Nietzschean version is positive in the way I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's when you look into the void and the void looks back at you, and then going on to deal with the rest of your life. Um, it's like it's gonna come anyway. It's like everyone has to confront that part of
Mm-hmm.
themselves and the basic indifference of the universe. And if you can come to terms with it quicker, that's probably better, I would guess. And then maybe that makes you a little nihilistic for the rest of your life. Like it, I was thinking about Nietzsche, and I was thinking, well, does a little piece of Nietzsche now live in all of us? Like how widespread of an influence does a philosophy like that have? Like, does that mean has that meme now infected all of us? Like, I don't like maybe it's not even true. I don't know. That's another option. Like, it might just be an idea of his that has no bearing on how.
Specifically, you mean like Nietzsche's like tragic but like heroic God is dead, in love with life, amore fati, love of fate, and this idea
Yeah,
like the infinite recurrence, like you
yeah,
life recurs over, like all that kind of like Nietzschean ideas. You're asking like, is that infected all of us? That's the question.
yeah. Do you have an answer? Do you have an answer?
I don't know. I'm thinking about it as you're asking. I tend to err on the side of variety. I tend to think that we have a bias to sort of assume that a lot of people are like us.
Hmm.
When in reality, like the more I've learned, I just feel like they're Nietzscheans and they're anti-Nietzscheans, and anti-Nietzsche could be different things. Like anti-Nietzsche could be full-blown nihilist, anti-Nietzsche could be, full-blown, like it's not even a question. Like it's just this life is meaningful and there's a no-brainer. And so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, has Nietzsche had an influence on our culture for sure? Has
Yeah.
Nietzsche influenced a lot of people for sure? Um, but but I don't know. I mean, is there something universal in Nietzsche that like really gets to the heart of the human condition experience? I don't know. It's a tough
Well,
question.
if you're comfortable defining a sense of the world that is Nietzschean and anti-Nietzschean, and you're just one guy, and when you said it, it made sense to me. I think that's pretty solid evidence that it has. That would be my argument.
So here's a thought. Here's a thought that I think about.
Okay.
Um, I'm attracted to the idea of rebirth, of different lives.
Yeah.
I'm attracted to that idea. Interestingly, it's related to Nietzsche, right? Because Nietzsche had this idea of infinite recurrence, imagining that Nietzsche suffered tremendously in his life. He
Yeah.
writes at one point, I remember reading an essay of his or a letter of his where he talks about, considering suicide very seriously, someone who's afflicted with every, physical ailment you can imagine. Um, and he ended up writing that, like, the sort of, I guess, is this, I'm not sure this is exactly amor fati or not, I'm not exactly sure how he phrased it, but like sort of the ideal, the heroic approach is to, be willing to live your life over and over again, no problem. So that's like a kind of a rebirth. That's like a cyclical rebirth of the same life. But the idea of rebirthing into other lives, and not so much that there's souls that come and go from our planet, but like the fact that we're all basically the same. Every life, there's a mind body organism, like different brain, different body, but like the consciousness, the spark of like I exist, the spark, like the so to speak, the sense of I am, that like looks out onto the world, from a body, from a particular psychological condition, that seems to be the same to me in everyone. And I think we're all the same, and in that sense, like, you know I like to explore the thought experiment that, like, I live every life. This is the life that I remember, but I've lived the life of all the people in my life, and I will live the life. Every person that I wrong, I'm going to live that life from that perspective as well. And so like from the perspective of my anxiety, someone who worries about like the future, worries about this, there's a relaxing there because this is a sense that everything's going to happen. Every bad thing has happened and will happen. You know, it's sort of like an embrace of just all the bad and all the good, and a surrender almost to that. So that's sort of an approach that I've sort of toyed with and experimented with. How does that land with you?
It's a beautiful thought, man. It's beautiful. The only problem I have is when an idea is very attractive to me, now I have to question my own attraction to it.
Sure.
That's all. It's
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, yeah, it sounds great, but maybe because it sounds great, maybe that's what I should question about it. But with something like that, it's so vague. It's like, well, you would never be able to know anyway, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like, well, I guess I'll just try and do the best with what I got now. Uh,
Yeah, I hear that. Here's another question that I think about a lot. I'll pose to you, and you could pass it back to me, and I'll give you my thoughts on it, which are all much. My thoughts are what's the word I'm looking for? They're unprocessed, right? They're just raw and
cool. Yeah.
yeah, not fully thought through. But a question I think about a lot because I'm coming to you off of like, let's say about a year and a half, maybe 2 years or so of like being very interested in Eastern spirituality. So like after a lifetime of not having any contact with Eastern ideas, sort of finding it like about, let's say, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and being very interested in it, and then like reading up and trying to meditate through that. So that's sort of where I am right now in the arc of my life. It's not, haven't always been this way, and I probably won't always be this way, but this is where my mind is now. So, I wonder about like in Eastern thought, there's this concept of enlightenment. There's this concept of like achieving a state of like a psychological kind of peace or perfection,
Mm.
and a question that comes up is like that in my mind, like, is that even real, or is that like a myth? Is that just like a something that like acolytes, people who worship their gurus, is that like propaganda they've been sold to like just so that to consolidate power among like an elite priestly class, what I'm saying?
Mm.
Is it even a real thing? And if it is a real thing, like what does that mean? Like what does that look like? So like I would pose that as a question to you. Like, is there like an endpoint of like psychological health? And like what would that be? Like how would you describe that if that exists at all?
Well, I think a classic guru would say, no, there's never an endpoint. Like enlightenment is like thinking of it as an endpoint would be a fallacy. Like it's a once you reach that state, it's like you need a constant re-upping of that state. Like it's not, and re-upping isn't really the right way to say it either, but like it's not like once you achieve it, then it's like boom, you turn into a beam of light, and then you just stay a beam of light until your corporeal body disappears. It's like you're still going to deal with these basic fundamental things. Like you got to eat and take craps, and like you got to. There's all these like basic human stuff that has to be done. Uh, so I don't know. Is that an answer? Uh, I mean, is that what you're talking about with enlightenment? Is like a final way of being? Like, is that what
Well,
you
yeah, I
mean?
mean, I agree 100%. I discount. I don't accept the magical claims of any
Yeah,
guru at all. And I'm not, first of all, I'm not mentioning any gurus, to be clear. Like I'm not someone who follows gurus or cares about gurus. This is just
yeah.
hypothetical, right?
Or like
But
your
but
Jim Newman, who wouldn't call himself a guru, but like
right,
is
exactly.
tech,
That
but he
Neo
is
Advaita.
kinda.
Yeah. So
He
you
is like
exactly.
kinda.
Right, 100%. I love that. I love that you call that who I'm thinking of. Right. So Jim Newman in this is like an example of this Neo Advaita line of thinking, which is very interesting to me, right? So exactly, he wouldn't call himself a guru, but right. So certainly the assumption here is that there's like there's no magical state, right? You're still gonna have to take a shit like everyone else, and do all the nothing's changing. You're not, like you said, you're not turning to a beam of light.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, to me, the question is like the question is basically, is Jim Newman full of shit? I've interviewed Jim Newman on my channel, by the way.
I
Uh,
watched it.
yeah, like, so that's the question. Like, is he serious, or is he not? Like, is he like, that's when I want when I seek out an interview like that, like I sort of want to know, like is he for real? Like, did he really land somewhere, which is like in a sort of like perfected, so to speak, or like a sort of like a stable kind of complete place of like psychological health, or is he like faking it? That's like the question, you know?
It's I think it's a really interesting question, and and whoever watches this is go have to go watch that. But like the way, see, to me, it's not. I don't think he's faking it. I'll say that right out the gate. I don't think he's faking it. I think he has reached that place, and I think that place is very real. The problem is, I don't. I imagine I would get bored with that place. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you asked him that question, is like, is this kind of performance art? And he's like, well, no, because then that would like require this to be that, and you know. But at the same time, he has to be acknowledging some part of himself, which is like, well, I am going out there, like I am doing something that is mildly performative. And so that's the part that I don't know how he balances out. Like I don't know how or any guru really, if because I think that place is real. But then if once that place is real, then why do you bother going out and trying to do anything about it? That's the paradox that tickles me a little bit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question for sure. I think if someone were to phrase like the most concise question mark for someone like Jim Newman or any guru, like the question becomes like, well, why are you going around talking about this? You know what I'm saying? Like if
yeah,
really, that's and so I mean people have asked him that. I've heard him answer that question, but people can go find his videos and see how he
okay,
answers. I think he
okay,
gives an interesting
okay.
answer, but it's not relevant for us right now, necessarily. But yeah, no, I think it's an interesting question. And I wonder about that. I wonder what that's like. That's why. So Neo Advaita is something I'm very interested in, which is like Jim Newman, and sort of what that means, what that looks like, and trying to think about that. You know.
I mean, it's a great thing to think about, and like I'm glad he exists. And I remember, but I brought up one of his videos, and immediately I was watching with my girlfriend. Immediately, she just started doing other things. Like it's kind of one of those weird, like you you already have to be interested in it to like get there. And so that I imagine would be part of his response is like, well, I'm doing this for people who already want it, which is a great thing to do. And like I wasn't questioning that at all. I was just questioning, like, I feel like I would get bored. I don't know. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I would get bored with it. Like I'd want to do something else or just make stuff. I don't know. I like making stuff too
Mm-hmm.
too much. I think.
So I'll make it personal again. I'll come back to my own personal psychological path here. So for me, after I think my anxiety masked over a deep sense of emptiness, in my life, like a deep sense of meaninglessness. Um, and I think what someone like Jim Newman can say to that to me when speaking, when what I hear in a message from someone like that is that like that deep sense of meaninglessness or that emptiness, at the core of being that you seem to perceive, like that's the meaning, like that's the secret, like that's the miracle, like that's the beauty, like that's the thing, like that like is the core magic of existence, and it's maybe that's just like a cynic might say it's like a silly Jedi mind trick or something that would never work. But like the idea is like can you sit with that and see this as like not a problem to be solved, but like the like the fundamental secret of like human consciousness, like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
you know
yeah. Well, I mean, well, see, that's where I have a problem with it. Like, I mean, it definitely is, and I think it's a wonderful feeling. Like I do too. Like when you sit, it's like a gift once you've found it. Like once you're not trying to run away from it. Once you've sort of looked it in the face or understood it. But I think it's like one secret among many.
mm,
Like to say there's one secret for consciousness. Well, then doesn't that belie or deny the idea of someone who's just not interested in this Eastern medicine stuff? Like, isn't their consciousness equally valid in the sense like they're just never going to pursue it or understand it? And well, that seems equally valid to me. It's and so there's a secret to their consciousness too. I mean, that was the secret for my consciousness. Like you're talking about your anxiety. I could probably have called my depression anxiety too. I mean, I know they're kind of interchangeable in certain ways of talking about them. Um, but yeah, it just yeah, uh, it's like it's great. But once I've found the secret, I don't. I'm not really all that interested in just like staying in that place. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And again, another thing, so just to be clear, like I don't see myself as like talking for Jim Newman or
Oh
anyone
yeah,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah. No,
you
no.
know.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I think your point is totally spot on. And I think a test, a litmus test, I think of anyone who like claims to have like knowledge of psychological utility is to like not think that there's like a moral value in like being interested in this stuff, you know? Like to me, like you're saying, like people who um don't care about like deep existential questions, are could be perfectly healthy, in
yeah,
the best kind of way. Like no, I don't think there's any moral virtue in like being obsessed with like existential questions. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah. It would be weird if there was.
Right.
That would like undercut the whole process. It would be
Right.
strange. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I mean, like but it's a part of all of us, right? Like the little preacher part, like that just like was like, well, you're having trouble with this, but if you just realize that life is meaningless, you wouldn't be having trouble with this anymore. It's and it's such a paradox when you say stuff like that to people who are really want their lives to have meaning. It's like, well, you're having trouble because you're thinking about it wrong. Well, yeah, I just I think that's the great part about art is it's never pedantic. It's never trying to convince you of something. In fact, it should have enough humor that it knows it's not trying to convince you of this. It's just a way of thinking about a question.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What are you working on these days? What's on your mind? What are you trying to create?
Uh, I am trying to create a novel. Yeah, it's the
It's
Moby
not
Dick.
easy.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
easy.
yeah. It's and well, I've written a lot. I've written too much, and so it's been slowed down quite a bit, and I'm trying to be very deliberate with it and really fine tone each sentence to a place where it's you know does exactly what it needs to for the places. But it's ostensibly about a guy in a lead singer in a metal band, which it is based on a real guy that I met and who was just this uh, aggressive dude, but so like on the inside, so deeply vulnerable.
Mm,
And so I was like, and like a lot of new books these days aren't written in a very masculine style.
mm,
It's all pretty girly or the titch here by like there's a lot of gay men. It's a very feminine books in general are a very feminine endeavor. Like when I first took writing classes, I took well two, but like uh like girls are just naturally better at it. I think like girls are naturally better at empathy, just like right out the gate. But also I think it makes it because it's easier for them. Um, they might get bogged down in it a little bit. I don't know. I probably shouldn't speculate about that too much. Um, but yeah, it's yeah, writing a novel
that's
and
awesome,
trying
dude.
trying to think of reasons not to.
What's your secret for writer's block?
Well, I can tell you how I first started to write,
Sure. Yeah.
which was basically just put myself in a room and read as much as possible or listen to other people's thoughts, like like watch TV, whatever, just like listen to other people's thoughts, what they were thinking, what they were going through. Just do that for like 12 hours until I literally couldn't hold it anymore. It's like having to pee really bad. And then
Amazing.
you're just like, okay, I gotta write something. Um,
Wow. That's cool.
is it? I don't know. I yeah, but that was how I started, and I think it's kind of my crutch now. It's like I
Hmm.
still I still will kind of wait around until I really have to.
Are you into metal music?
I'm not at all, actually. I'm not. that's what attracts me to writing about it, is because it's like it's hard, and I don't really get the scene that much. So it's like I have to do a lot of research. Uh,
Nice.
yeah. So
I've been to a lot of metal shows in my day, and
really,
noise shows also.
yeah.
Yeah.
What attracts you to it? I'd be very interested to hear.
Oh man, it's an otherworldly experience for me. I mean, like you just I actually have a video on my channel about Pharmacon, who's a noise artist that who I saw live. Um, but what is it? It's just it's hard to explain. I mean, it's you know what? It's I don't think it's any different. I really think it's really the same kind of thing that someone who can go to a beautiful classical music concert, which I've done by the way. I enjoy classical music as well, you know, and just be swept away by the power and beauty of the music. You know, it and you could say, how is that possibly the same thing as like a metal concert or a noise metal concert, which is like the most abrasive sounds in the world? But that it seems bizarre, and also the context is different, and the reaction to the music is all very different. But I think deep down there's an aesthetic experience there, which is like sort of universal. You know, the
Yeah,
power of like just being swept away by great art, and to an outsider, so like someone who just like doesn't get metal music or whatever, like it seems absurd. Like, how could this be great art? This is noise. You know, this is like, how could it be? But as absurd as it sounds, there's art there, and it just, if you have an ear for it, you know, you have an ear for it, you know, and then you're just overwhelmed with the aesthetic experience. That's it.
yeah, absolutely. I mean that's my impression of it, and that's how I write about it. And I mean, like when I've gone to a show, that was my deep impression. I don't like it, but yeah, it's like it's so interesting to me that, yeah, like being swept away. And I don't know, my ears are just sensitive, man. I just
Yeah, you got
like
to wear earplugs, man, no
yeah,
doubt.
you gotta wear the
Otherwise you
earplugs.
damage your
Yeah,
hearing for life.
yeah,
But yeah, no, it's hard to explain, you know, and but that's cool. I love that. Listen, so that project's exciting to me, dude. And if ever you need like a proofreader, I mean, I'll read the final product, but if you want something, you know, if you want a reader before the final product, I'd love to, you know, just give you a, you know, review a draft or whatever, you know, be good for you. I'm super interested in that.
that'd be great, man. That'd be awesome. I'd be down. I ever since I became a quote unquote real writer, I do not reject any help with editing. It's like when you're a young writer, that's something you're like, oh no, nobody can touch this. Nobody can change my precious words. And now I'm like, yeah, give me your feedback, man. Like,
All right. Unfortunately I gotta end pretty soon.
word.
From my perspective, this has been super fun, and I really enjoyed talking with you. And listen, I'd love to do this again if ever you're around. You know,
Yeah,
we could do it again sometime.
yeah, yeah. We'll have to set up another time.